Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Than a BCDR Plan, executing your coronavirus business continuity strategy with speed and agility. I am your host for today, Emily Figg, Vice President at OnSpring.
Hi, everyone. This is Jason Rolfe. I'm the Vice President of Solutions with OnSpring. Just a quick little background. My team is responsible for building and deploying a number of different solutions on the OnSpring platform. I myself have spent the last 10 years designing, implementing, and improving these types of solutions. And lately, business continuity and disaster recovery has gained a lot of importance. So we're really obviously very excited to talk to you guys about this today.
So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a background into why we chose this particular topic today and what we were hoping each one of you could learn from. We've had several of our own customers reach out to us and share some of the examples that they are using right now to execute their own business continuity strategies and how those are going. And some of them have been fantastic examples that we thought everybody should see and understand, and hopefully get a couple new ideas that they could then take back and execute in their own organization. Because on the other side of the fence, we've also had conversations with companies from every industry vertical and numerous company sizes that have said, here's what I'm trying to do. How can I do this in a smarter and more efficient manner? And so this is a perfect way for us to kind of showcase what many businesses are doing already to mitigate all of the efforts that are surrounding today's pandemic. And what we did is we took all of these examples and we aggregated them into one story. So we're going to deliver a fictional story to you that gives specific examples in each one of these categories, so that we, one, protect the privacy of all of our customers, and two, give you guys examples that can relate to essentially any size business or any industry. So we're going to start with our problem statement that most of our prospects and other businesses have come to us with. So in this example, our fictional story is of Emily's Fancy Pharma. This is a pharmaceutical company. They make generic antivirals, and they have most of their customers located in the United States. However, almost all of their sourcing for active ingredients and almost all of their manufacturing takes place in mainland China. So enter coronavirus 1.0, when the first case was announced at the beginning of January, and China put in measures that essentially shut down all production capacity for the month. Because Emily's Fancy Pharma has been doing business in China for so long, they had already been planning for the shutdown that was expected during Chinese New Year. And this year, it was scheduled for the first week in February. So they already had some proactive measures in place to mitigate the supply disruption that they were anticipating. What they did not have in place quite yet is a long-term strategy that would enable them to manage weeks on end and now months on end of supply chain disruption. So a couple important facts in this example. One, pharmaceutical industry is a highly regulated business. Most of the active ingredients are sourced from China. And as I mentioned, all the manufacturing is done in China. There are other considerations at play for this particular company. One being quality control measures. They have had a history of inaccurate formulas coming to light, and there's also been a history of drugs being shipped that missed those formulas and got into consumer hands, which means their procurement and supply chain team is hyper vigilant about which suppliers get to do business with them. They have the most rigorous standards for vetting anyone that comes into their organization, and they have the most rigorous standards in their manufacturing process because they have a healthcare incident that they have to comply with. So they're in a situation right now where their supply chain is disrupted. They have no line of sight into when manufacturing can begin. So their options are, should we just cut off our sales cycle while we wait for this to play out? Because we know we can't produce anything at this point in time. That has serious revenue impact. So it's not a great option. The second option is maybe we should just find alternate sources of our active ingredients or find some other production facilities that we could set up shop in. Those both pose quality control risks, and they also pose logistic problems. You can't just pick up and move your factory to Taiwan. You have to get things set up and so on and so forth. So again, not awesome. So the other option is, what if we just waited it out and just see what happens? But at the same time, Emily's Fancy Pharma, in this example, they have a board that's constantly asking for updates. They have business owners that need to know what to do on a day-to-day basis. And the exec team is tasked with communicating both up and down their own organization with what's going on, when, and how. So they need to first gather information that helps them understand what their supply chain, their active ingredient sources, and their manufacturers can deliver on. And then they have to figure out how that's going to impact not only production, but the logistical delivery of getting it back to the United States and distributed across their retailers. And three, they also need a way to communicate to everybody how this process is going to happen and what is going to occur next. So in the ideal space, oops, I skipped a slide. In the ideal space, what they need is something that gives them speed in communicating above and below, and they need a way to share all of this information to internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Simultaneously, they also need a way to collect data from their suppliers. They need a way to activate tasks throughout their organization so that when they have information coming in from those suppliers, at the same time, they can have their own team on the ground figuring out a way to plan around whatever information came in. And then thirdly, they need something that they can communicate to their board, across the exec team, and to all of the business owners what's happening in real time and what is going to be done about it. So with all of this in mind, we're going to take you through the core elements of any business continuity plan, starting with creating the plan, what it looks like for this particular example right now, and what an optimal version would be. And then we'll segue into what it looks like for plan activation. And then we'll segue into monitoring and reporting. So you can see each step of the way what businesses are currently doing and how it falls apart, and what businesses could be doing and how it sets them up for success. So we'll go through all of those examples. We'll answer questions at the end and cover anything else that you guys might have questions on. So Jason, I'm going to ask you, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to add, and thank you, Emily, for kind of that great setup, but I wanted to add just a few from our perspective. You know, as Emily said, this has been a very common request from customers. It's something that has really ramped up over time. Interestingly enough, we were just on a company meeting and we learned about one of our clients who significantly accelerated the timeline of their business continuity solution implementation simply because of sort of the environment we're living in right now. And like Emily said, the risks there, and she made a great point about risk analysis, having to, you know, it's not just putting a plan in place to make sure that this process continues, but obviously there's a prioritization and a risk element to this. And these things need to be carefully weighed. And when information is disjointed, when it's dispersed broadly, it does become a lot harder to keep a handle, you know, both inside the organization and out. So, you know, for us, organization, efficiency, visibility, these are the things that are paramount that we really want to talk about today. So as Emily said, today we're going to kind of do that side-by-side comparison of different approaches for building that plan, maintaining, deploying that plan. And really, if nothing else, what's sort of been highlighted for me in the last few weeks, really this comes down to stress reduction. You know, we can talk about risk management and operations and planning, but at the root of all of this, as I'm sure everyone on the call can relate to, is there's a tremendous amount of stress. There's a tremendous amount of unknown. So being able to keep control over things you can have control over can actually be a very powerful thing. So yeah, Emily, absolutely. I'm happy to kind of walk through sort of the side-by-side scenarios. And like Emily said, the first thing we kind of wanted to talk about is sort of let's look at some traditional methods of defining, developing, managing a plan, and then we can look at how that may be optimized with the solution. All right, so Emily's going to go ahead and kickstart our little scenario. So typically, I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with what we're looking at, your Windows Explorer, where your files are, and we can see we've got this master listing of tasks associated with this plan. So when we're talking about building the plan, updating the plan, you're going to see Microsoft Word a lot. You're going to see Microsoft Excel a lot. These are tried and true solutions and tried and true tools, and Excel is great because it does provide that data structure. But as you can see, just kind of updating that information, maintaining who those task owners are, being able to track the order of operations and the status becomes a bit more difficult when everything is disjointed. Not only that, but when we update our master task list, we also have to go through the trouble of updating the actual business continuity plan. So this is something that's going to get distributed to everyone in the organization so they know what their role is and kind of what the plan states. So if you think about it in terms of developing a plan, and that's just a very quick and simple example, but you're dealing in the companies we're dealing with have this information in a very decentralized fashion. They're maintaining it in a very decentralized fashion. You see a common approach of updating this data in multiple locations. Not only that, a big challenge is keeping track of who things have been assigned to. Have people left the organization? What does that mean to our plan? And then finally, just access issues. How do we know that the right people are seeing and doing the right things, or only seeing the things that they're privy to? So when you're maintaining things on shared drive and things are widely distributed, it becomes much more difficult to manage this. So I think, Emily, now we go, yeah, go ahead, Emily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, take us through ideal method of, instead of doing everything in Excel and managing it day to day from a manual basis, what would that look like?
Absolutely. So, yep, Emily's going to go ahead and hit play. So now if we're in the system, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate within our central repository to where the plan is stored. And you can immediately see all of the different bits of information that we can keep in one central place. And now if we need to add a new task, it's right here within the plan. As soon as we create this task, it's going to be tied to that plan. It's going to become part of that plan. Here where we're selecting the responsible party, the individual who's the primary task owner, that can be used to drive access control. So I can make sure that Leslie can only see the information that's pertinent to her, or when I'm presenting information out to my involved parties, they have a very focused view of what they're responsible for. So even in something as simple as updating this task, you can see the task is there. And once I save this, we now also have the ability to really maintain the central repository, make these simplistic updates, drive that level of access control so that people are just seeing and dealing with the correct things. Not only that, but we can also quickly produce that plan document right out of this system so that if we do need to distribute that widely to the team members, we know who the team members are and we know who needs to receive that information. So really it's about data integrity, access control, making sure that we've got a very consistent, clean data set to work off of, because then once the plan gets activated, as we'll talk about here in just a second, that's going to be of utmost importance. So just to reiterate what Jason said, taking your plan, whether it's in Excel, whether it's in Word, whatever format, and putting it in a central database where you have one single source of truth that everyone references,
It is always up to date with the most accurate reflection of data coming in and visibility into whatever actions need to come out of that. This is what creates consistency across the teams and gives everybody visibility into what needs to happen and when, where we are lacking from just using Excel or Word or whatever, is most of the customers, or I'm sorry, not the customers, most of the companies we have been talking to, this is where they're kind of falling flat right now. Like, I don't have a way to make sure everybody's on the same page. This is essentially step one of that process. So let's look at it now from, you have your plan in place and you just need to act on it. And you have multiple stakeholders that have assignments. You've got an internal team that needs to take some type of action, whether it's figuring out their own unique plan to their particular role, or whether it's reaching out to any of the suppliers. So Jason's going to take us through what that looks like today in your own environment when you're doing it on your own, whether that's Word, Excel, etc.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So, it's one thing to document the plan, right? To log tasks and to be able to just kind of email that out to the stakeholders. That part seems relatively easy to manage in the grand scheme of things. But now we're activating the plan. So I know that I need to put our manufacturing continuity plan into place because of all of the factors that Emily brought up. So in my shared drive, or even at a cloud file drive, I'm creating a new folder. I'm creating new kind of copied versions of these files. And now what I need to do is make sure that this file that I've just created is actually available and allows me to be able to track the status to see who has been assigned items. So as I expose that status column, I now have the ability to potentially track that status. And now what I get to do is take that point in time document and distribute it out to this broad group of individuals. And if I'm lucky, if you see my great typing skills there, if I'm lucky, I may have a distribution list set up as I do here where, hey, I know that people in this group or on this list are the people who have the plans or who need the information about this plan. But oftentimes I'm trying to either send multiple emails or send one big group email. And now I'm sending out all of these tasks. This individual task list is now being blasted out to multiple people. And inevitably, instead of updating their task list, maybe someone's just going to email me back and say, hey, I've finished this particular task. So now as the plan owner or the coordinator, it's now incumbent upon me to go back into my central listing of tasks and keep track. So ultimately what happens is I'm parsing and distributing these tasks, this information out to a broad subset of people. I'm doing a lot of management in email. And Lord knows we all get enough emails and we're all dealing with enough in our email. But in the midst of a crisis of this nature, if you're trying to constantly monitor things through email, things are going to get lost pretty easily. And it's going to prove to be very frustrating. Not only that, if I want to do some real-time status tracking, or I want to remind one of my task owners, hey, I need to know where you are with this task. Have you been doing this? Is this up to date? Again, I need to go into my email or I need to pick up the phone. It's a lot of administrative heavy lifting for that person doing that coordination.
So in a way to eliminate all of the heavy lifting and the coordination, take us through what it looks like if you're essentially taking all those tasks and automating them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go back to our plan record that we looked at before where we were updating those tasks. Remember, we created that last task about doing the executive briefing. So now we go into our continuity plan, we go back into our task management, and you can see there's a very simple way, a very simple mechanism we have to activate the plan. We can log the date that the plan was activated. We can provide any context for when and why the plan was activated. And the best part about this for me is that we've got all of these defined tasks. Once I activate that plan, those tasks automatically generate. And there are a variety of different ways to get those assigned individuals make them aware of the tasks they've been assigned. So for example, a report on a dashboard, my open BCDR tasks. I can see that these are the tasks that have been assigned to me. I can self-serve and self-manage and provide my own status. And then for the status kind of owner, the plan owner, it's really about monitoring that real-time input and that real-time display of where everybody is in their process. And because that data is being captured in the system, I can monitor that from a variety of different angles, as we'll see later in the reporting process. So, really when we're auto-generating those tasks and offering multiple ways to engage those task owners, they can also make their own job more efficient in that they're not trying to monitor emails from you and reply back on email. They've got a central landing place to go manage their tasks, see exactly what's been assigned to them. And you can even get more detailed in terms of tracking overall completion percentages, compliance with established timelines, and you can report that not just in the context of this plan activation, but also over the course of multiple activations, so you can monitor your performance and improvement over time. So really, in a situation like we're facing today, the need to move quickly is, I think we've all kind of, I don't want to overstate it, but I think we've all realized the importance of that. So efficiency here is an ultimate key of this approach.
So this works really, really well when you are trying to get your own internal organization moving together in the same direction. But let's go through the example from our fictional story where Emily's Fancy Pharma has tens of thousands of suppliers in mainland China and all the manufacturing hubs. And this organization needs to understand what's going to happen with the supplies, when are we going to pick back up on manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So we need to talk to everybody that's external to our organization. And this is an example that has come up with a lot of the customers, I'm sorry, I keep saying companies, there we go, companies, non-customers. I have thousands of suppliers. Right now I am sending manual emails to them. What is the better approach where I can aggregate all of the data and figure out where to go from there? So let's go through the external plan activation first. And Jason, kind of walk us through what everybody has been telling us that they're doing right now.
Sure. Absolutely, Emily. Because this webinar is only an hour, I'm going to keep this really simple and do this just for one vendor. But to Emily's point, we've talked to companies that have dozens or hundreds or even thousands of suppliers that they need to, gather data from. So in this case, I've taken this standard vendor questionnaire and then created a version for this fictional vendor called BMID. Now, this plan may have multiple vendors associated with it. So this is just but one communication I might have out of, again, dozens, hundreds. So I'm basically got to go find who my vendor contact is. I'm going to send them an email with this Excel attachment, even if it's a simplistic email or just a few data points I need to gather. As we all know, if I want to enforce that data integrity in Excel, it becomes a little bit more difficult once I start kind of sending that information out to other people. I have to build in all sorts of data integrity enforcements and access controls around sheets, and that becomes quite cumbersome. So in this situation, if I just did that, right, I've got my vendor questionnaire for BMID, and I've got to do that another 24 times or another 100 times. Not only does it take me that level of effort to copy that spreadsheet, send it out to people, even if I'm not copying the spreadsheet, just sending that spreadsheet out to people, and then just like with the internal tasks, that constant follow-up process. Are you done yet? When are you going to be done? This is time-sensitive information. Now my whole job becomes pinging all of these people who haven't responded yet, which I'm sure can be extremely frustrating.
So Jason, let's jump to automation of the exact same process and what that looks like.
Yep, absolutely. So really quick, you're going to see inside this tab, Impacted Organization Elements, there's a relationship to my BMID vendor. And the beauty of this is that when I activated that plan, we actually sent that vendor contact a link to a survey that they can now access online. We've got a consistent set of questions. It's the same questions that we just sent them in that spreadsheet, but we have a very consistent and structured method of gathering. You notice that those fields are required. The vendor would not be able to submit that survey without giving us all of the requested information. And we keep it very simple. We can monitor the status and which vendors have and have not responded. When they do respond, those results are immediately available to us. So now you see on this dashboard, not only do I have a report where I can see that there's a survey that's been submitted, I can take it down to a much more granular level. And I can go ahead and indicate that I've reviewed this, provide any review notes. If there's any follow-up that comes out of this, I can coordinate that all through the same place. So really the key here is that, you know, if you have those vendor relationships in place, if you know which third parties or vendors are associated with your plans, we can automate those communications, automate the delivery and the request for that information, monitor when that information comes in. We can look at the results not just within the context of one vendor, but across all of our vendors. If we were to survey 100 vendors and we ask them all that same question, right, we could see the distribution of those responses across all vendors and really help us make sense out of what's happening out there and where where we may not just have an issue with one specific vendor, but we may have something that's more endemic across all of our vendors, and that may drive a completely different type of mitigation plan or response plan. So not just efficiency, but also the level of granularity that you can get to. We need to know where the issues lie in this situation, and we need that information as quickly and in as structured of a manner as possible.
Jason, I think that the most interesting part to me is that because of the survey questions that we drafted, we were able to rank which ones are of more priority and less priority. So as they come through, you can see on the right side of the screen. Well, there we go. On the right side of the screen.
Yep.
Just kidding. On the right side of the screen.
There you go. She knows what she's doing.
You can see specifically, okay, this response just came through. This is something that I need to activate and do something with right now. Whereas when you use any other kind of tool, whether it's a survey tool or even just sending it out via email, there's not an efficient way to kind of flag those. And I think this is a really good example of how that does that. So thank you for including that. So I think just to reiterate what Jason said in the compare and contrast of what we're hearing companies do right now without any type of automation compared to what our own customers are experiencing is really the speed by which they can deliver on their business continuity plans. Expediting anything that comes through as a potential risk, communicating internally with employees, communicating externally with vendors. We've had specific comments come back where the amount of time saved has just enabled them to focus on their strategy and figure out what their next move is. They've also been able to eliminate all kinds of like human errors, just typing things wrong or sending it to the wrong vendor or sending it to the wrong employee to activate something. So the speed and accuracy has really come into play here, just by which of instigating everything at the same time and seeing real time everything that comes back and how you can shift your strategies, your plans, your actions as new information comes to light. I think we're seeing that every single day, sometimes on the hour, with our own news feeds right now, when regulations come out, when government officials publish new information on the coronavirus today. Each one of those statements can impact a tiny piece of our plan. And being able to respond to that quickly and get the communication out immediately can sometimes make a huge difference in your organization's ability to respond to something.
Yeah,
so
and Emily, just to quickly add to that, Emily, I'm sorry, I really like that point about the adjusting, right? The ability to adjust, the ability to pivot. I mean, as we've all seen in this particular situation we're dealing with, the new unknowns come at us at a very rapid pace. So also, giving our customers and giving these companies the ability to quickly and easily pivot their processes, kind of pivot their approach to sort of match what the new demands are. I couldn't agree more that that's a really critical piece here.
I mentioned a little bit ago the reporting structure. Like when things come in, you can immediately see it and report to your exec team, to your board. Here's what's going on with my vendors in China. Here's how my manufacturing's going. Let's now shift into the reporting and monitoring function specifically, and how companies today are handling that, and where some of those, as you mentioned, Jason, those tried and trusted programs like Excel and Tableau and things like that, where they maybe fall short. So Jason will take us through this portion of our current approach.
Absolutely, and this is sort of a microcosm of the whole reporting concept, right? You guys remember we have this list of tasks that we're dutifully dropping down and indicating that tasks have been completed. Now, in order to be able to tell senior management, to tell executive leadership what's happening, I'm sure many of you have used the pivot chart and the pivot table. They are good reporting tools, but they are relatively inflexible. And sometimes they're a little difficult to manage if you're inserting new rows or new columns. Sometimes there's a lot of formatting or reformatting that needs to be done. Sometimes I always get concerned about the data integrity component as well. But again, I'm taking this information out of my sort of standalone spreadsheet, I'm pasting it into an email, and I'm sending it off to the management team or to the executive team so that they can get their update. And so in this case, again, the data sort of lives with one person or the one central individual responsible for this. And it's almost as if everyone else is kind of being kept in the dark until that person gets around to being able to distribute those results. So again, that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. That's going to create some anxious times, because especially in the current climate we're facing, the more information that people can have and the sooner they can have it, the more they can make better decisions and make more timely decisions. So that's something we're hoping to kind of demonstrate in the alternate world that we're talking about.
Yeah, because I have definitely made those reports on my own and sent them out, and everybody is just waiting. Emily, when are you going to have that report? When are you going to have that report? But in this alternate world, it's like reports on steroids. It's so much better. So Jason, take us through this portion.
Absolutely. And Emily can't give those reports to you, by the way, because she's sending out 100 vendor emails. So in this case, I'm going to go to one specific report. This report is just intended to mimic exactly what we had with our Excel file. We're looking to provide a status on the tasks related to this plan. So on an ad hoc basis, if I want to, I can export this data into Excel or PDF. I can even indicate, to what level I want to export the data. Is the chart going to be helpful, the chart data, and so forth. So this is just one small, minor example of how we can get data out of the system. That's not even talking about the reporting capability itself. And here we just want to show you what that extract looks like. So if I download that file, and that would come to me in an email, I'm just showing you that just from a timeliness perspective. But now I've got a nice clean PDF that sends out, that I can send out to those impacted parties. Or we can set up report scheduling so that automatically goes out to a designated group of people on a scheduled basis. And it's not just that one report, though. As we scroll down through this dashboard, there's multiple reporting options. There's a lot of different ways to analyze and present and evaluate the data. And each report is going to sort of have its own purpose, its own usefulness within the context of your program. And we're just going to kind of scroll down to the end here, right? We can look at, our BCDR tests by test scenarios, by test status. We'll touch on testing in just a second here. But as we scroll back up to the dashboard, I want to allude back to something Emily said at the beginning, is it's not just about continuity. Incidents, vendor relationships, risks and controls and policies, none of these things exist in a vacuum. So having a tool that can allow you to manage a key operational aspect like these continuity plans is you inevitably are going to have interaction points and touch points with a lot of these other critical functions and areas within your organization. So risk management is going to drive where the continuity and recovery plans need to exist. The policies are going to drive to what extent we need to document that. There's a lot of interrelationships. It's really kind of an ecosystem of processes, albeit, some that are assigned to specific groups of people, but nothing exists in that black box. So really, the reporting concept really comes down to this concept of visibility, so that everybody at a moment's notice can see exactly where everything is. People can self-serve the information. You have multiple ways to distribute and present that information. And having that dynamic reporting capability really allows you to evaluate things across a number of different angles, depending on what your need is.
So just to recap, with the reports that you could create when you centralize all of the data in one database and have all of your activities going in and out of that database, it gives you the focus, it gives you the real-time access to information and plans and results. So some of our customers have given us specific information on the financial impact that they've been able to make in their organization. They can see something coming. They've been able to shift and adjust so that they can move assets from one location to another based on what information they've received from their own supply chain, for example. And the second thing is just to focus on saving time, not sending all of those emails, not creating so many reports, so that you can sit down and really focus on how you need to adjust and how you need to move forward. I think that's the most important thing to reiterate here in this particular section about reporting. Having the data is tremendous, but having the time to sit down and think through what you do with that data is all the more important. Because all of us can be drowning in data, but if we don't have actionable insights to move from, then it's not valuable. And the third thing that I love the most about this reporting function that we just talked about is the ability to share it with everyone that needs it on a dime, whether they want to access it on their own or you send them updates as soon as new information is available, whatever that may be. That becomes a critical, not only a time saver, but it makes you look good, and that you can keep a steady, constant stream of communication with everybody, so everybody knows who's on first, who's on second, and who's rounding third. It's a great way to think about it. So there's one big component that we didn't touch on today because, to be honest with you, in today's coronavirus pandemic, everyone we've talked to, whether they are customers or non-customers, every single company is in activation plan mode. A lot of them are very much reactionary, not proactive. So the one piece that we'll kind of skip but touch lightly on is this idea of testing. So in a normal world, businesses put together their business continuity and disaster recovery plans ahead of time. They say, if this horrible scenario happens, here's how we can mitigate the risks, mitigate the impact, here's how we can make things better. And then they will put together some tests to intermittently evaluate whether their plans will actually work in that scenario. So the first thing they look at is, what tests should they be running? Which assets will be impacted the most? And how can we set up micro tests throughout a year, throughout a month, whatever the time period is, so that we can evaluate if those are effective. And those teams that put those together will look at how frequent should those tests be conducted. Does it need to only occur once a year? Does it need to occur once a month? Because these are the most critical assets that we need to protect. And the other thing that we've actually heard some customers say is, these tests and their current pandemic response plan have shed light on other business units they hadn't even thought about before that have been impacted. So they've set up new plans that impact their other teams that weren't previously involved in them. So it becomes a holistic approach to the organization, not just the biggest, most glaring issues at bay. And then one other thing to think about is, after we get through this current pandemic round, and after everybody's had some time to put together future roadmap tests, we need to sit down and think about what impact does this have on our annual planning? How does this impact our staffing plans, our R&D plans, our manufacturing plans? Going back to our example in the pharmaceutical world, does that mean that I need to start diversifying my suppliers if I can? Does that mean I need to look at different manufacturing plants if I can? What are my contingency options? How can I fund them? And how do I staff for them in the future? So there's all of these considerations that need to happen that come out of this planning. Jason, anything you want to mention?
Yeah, sorry, Emily, absolutely. I thought, Emily and I had a chance to sit down and talk about this. We obviously could not do this work in our office, so we made alternative arrangements. But something I thought of after she and I had planned this was a good way to talk about sort of testing and the importance of testing and really the value of it to your organization is just with a quick little anecdote. So I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but back in 2002, I was working at a consulting company where we provided internal audit services, and we happened to be doing a project at a high-rise building in Midtown Manhattan. I don't need to tell everyone on the phone what had occurred maybe about 6 to 7 months prior to that. So there was a fire drill. Everyone's been through a fire drill, and typically everybody just kind of eases their way out of the building. When this fire drill occurred, and the floor marshal came, and the emergency, the representatives from the New York Fire Department came, I have never seen a more involved and both emotionally and actually tactically involved group of office workers in my life. They wanted to know down to the detail, what are we supposed to do if this happens? What are we supposed to do if this happens? I bring that example up because I feel like we're facing something, obviously different, but similar in the regard that it's world changing, it's life changing. The way we're going to be reacting to these things in these situations in the future is inevitably going to change. And just like those folks who, still felt the sting of what had happened 6 months earlier, they now were becoming active participants and active players in this planning process, in this testing process. I don't think there's anyone in any of our organizations who doesn't want to know what's expected of them in a situation like that. So this is definitely something we're kind of just basically touching on right now, but I suspect it's something we'll certainly explore deeper in the future. But that's the first thing that stood out in my mind was that situation back in 2002. I imagine that once we can hopefully return to a sense of normalcy and getting back to our day-to-day lives, I'm going to suspect that people are going to be a little bit more hypersensitive to these types of continuity planning activities, and hopefully it will make them more willing participants as well.
That's a great example, Jason. So just to recap a little bit, if we go back to our example that aggregates what we've been hearing from customers and non-customer companies, they have options. They can do nothing. They can think through what that's going to cost them, what that means to their business, what that means to their workforce, things along those lines. Their second no one's picking that option. Let's just be honest here. Their second option is just keep doing what they're doing. They have a process in place. They're comfortable with Excel. They're comfortable with pivot charts. They know how to do those, but they're wasting a lot of time, and they need to make a decision on how much time are they willing to lose, how much are they willing to take on from a risk perspective, how much stress do they want to add to their lives. And their third option is to find a more efficient way to do that. They could start automating all of these processes. Think about how much time they'll gain, how much time they'll have to focus, maybe how many gray hairs they won't get as a result. But I mean, honestly, it kind of opens up time not only to react to what's going on today, but to start planning what could happen in future situations and just get ahead of the curve there. So consider some of these implications to your business, discuss them with your team, talk about what this could mean, what you could do. The leadership teams at any organization will look to every single person in that organization to come up with solutions. Doesn't matter who you are, what role you play, everyone is responsible for coming up with solutions. So think through what opportunities you have to revisit your current practice, figure out how you can optimize it for the future, and make everything easier, faster, smarter, more efficient. Add those things back into your life. So this includes the core content of our webinar. I've got two offers for everybody before we jump into questions. But the first is, please feel free to email Jason or myself directly if you have any questions that pertain to your business specifically. Our emails are there, jason@onspring.com, emily.fig@onspring.com. Any questions, totally fine. If you just want to send, hey, here's how I'm doing it this way, how could I be doing it differently or better, feel free to shoot us a note. And the second thing is, there are more free resources available at onspring.com, whether it's video, whether it's research reports, whether it's other webinars that have been recorded. All of those are free. You can access them and use them to your advantage. So I will pull up questions that have come through. And Jason, I will ask, I'll have you field, and then I'll jump in if we missed anything. So the first one is on surveys. Survey seems pretty cool that you showed us, but can I replicate this same functionality using something like SurveyMonkey?
You sure can. And if you'll notice, I realized it was a brief view of the OnSpring survey capability. It is very similar to capability you might get from another provider such as SurveyMonkey. I think what we tried to demonstrate, and I think the point I would drive home here is really, again, the value of that central repository, the value of being able to send automatically and collect and aggregate the information that you receive from those surveys and place them into the context of the program, the business continuity plan, the risks you're managing, the vendors that you're evaluating, and so forth. Because, we realize that surveying a vendor or gathering that information from a vendor, for example, likely is not going to be a one and done activity. In a more proactive setting, you're going to want to do that on a set frequency, maybe depending on the criticality or the materiality of that vendor. So I really truly see a lot of value in that concept of the central repository, the ability to kind of maintain all of that information within the same place.
So Jason, one follow-up question to that, that's along the same lines. And this is regarding Excel. So couldn't we just replicate or exchange Excel with Google Sheets because it's a real-time sharing mechanism?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I realize that, I may be using a little bit of an antiquated example, but let's face it, sometimes old habits die hard, right? But in that case, Emily, you're absolutely right. Google Sheets does provide you that online resource, and it does provide a place for people to share things. I would offer that probably some of the same reporting challenges would exist, whether you're managing that in a standalone Excel file or in Google Sheets, the ability to quickly and easily produce a consistent report. Also, again, I keep beating on it, but I'll go back to it. The contextual point. If I want to know how many times a particular task has been deployed, how many times was I compliant with the established timeline? Those are perspectives that might be a little bit harder to gain from a solution like Google Sheets. There's always the option, though, if you want to land people in Google Sheets, a lot of systems today will allow you to capture that data in that sort of very simplistic central location. There's nothing wrong with pulling that data in through an integration into a tool and being able to place it in that context. So certainly understand that that's a very popular tool that people are using, and wouldn't want to discourage you, but also just, as with anything, kind of consider the pros and cons.
Cool. So I'm going to ask one more question and we'll end with this one, because I think this one's probably really relevant. This question is, I already have my BCDR plan in place and it's activated. Yep. Is it too late to move to something like this, an automation element?
It's a great question. I don't want to sound hokey here, but I would say it's never too late. Everybody on this call, I would venture to guess, is doing the very best job that they can, and they're doing things as best as they can with the tools you've been given. And there's nothing wrong per se with doing things the way you're doing them. I'm really happy to hear that you have that planning process in place, that you've got a way to activate that. Obviously it does take some planning to think about, okay, how are we going to go from how things exist today to a new method or a new way of doing that? It's growth, it's change, it's going to be painful for some people. But I would really stress that it really is never too late. And that's exactly what we're here to help you with. That's something that, our team works with on a day-to-day basis. Hey guys, we're doing things like this today, but we want to, take this opportunity to improve it, make it more efficient, centralize things. We can not only help with, the tool itself that lets you do those things, but certainly with that transition process. And what does that sort of metamorphosis look like for you guys? So no, I don't think it's ever too late.
I agree wholeheartedly. So we will wrap with that. Thank you for everybody who was able to join us today. We will send a recording of this webinar after it finishes downloading later this afternoon. So have a great day and good luck. Thanks.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you guys very much. And I really wish, health and sanity to everybody on this call. I know this is a tough thing we're all dealing with, but, we're all in it together. So, just keep doing the best you can and really hope for the best for everybody.